Meet Sarah, a devoted wife and mother who thought she had it all. A loving husband, 2 beautiful kids, and a comfortable home. But, behind closed doors, her perfect facade was about to shatter into a million pieces. Little did she know, the man she trusted with every fiber of her being was hiding an explosive secret that would change everything. Sarah's life seemed picture perfect. She was married to the love of her life, Alex, in a beautiful lakeside house with 2 adorable children. They were that quintessential couple you'd see at PTA meetings or church gatherings, always smiling, always laughing together. Or so it seemed. As Sarah reflects on those seemingly perfect days at school functions or church gatherings, she starts to pinpoint the tiny cracks in their relationship's facade. There were the late-night phone calls, always hushed and brief when her husband would excuse himself from dinner conversations. The way he'd suddenly become busy at work, missing important family events or milestone moments. And then there was the mysterious business trip to Las Vegas, where he returned with a new watch and an air of secrecy that made Sarah's antennae twitch. It was a trip to Las Vegas for their anniversary that marked the beginning of the end of their marriage. Sarah had always been a bit jealous of her husband's bachelor days, but she thought they were in a good place. Little did she know, he had already met someone, a woman named Rachel who worked as a cocktail waitress at one of the high-end casinos. At first, it was just drinks and stories, but soon their conversations turned into late-night phone calls and secret meetings. Sarah's husband would come home smelling like perfume and talking about business deals that made no sense. He'd flash his new watch and say something like, "Hey, I got a great deal on this," without even noticing the skepticism in her eyes. But what really caught my attention was when he started making excuses to go out with the guys, poker nights or golf outings, that would last longer than usual. And then there were the phone calls from Rachel herself, always trying to reach him for urgent matters. Sarah had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right, but she pushed it aside, thinking maybe she was just being paranoid. Sarah tried to convince herself that the rumors were just that, rumors. She had been married to Tom for over a decade, and he was her rock, her partner in every sense of the word. But as she replayed their conversation with his co-worker in her head, something didn't sit right. The way Tom's eyes had darted around the room, avoiding hers when she asked him directly about it. The faint flush on his cheeks that seemed to vanish instantly when he laughed it off. She tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling herself she was just being silly, overthinking things. But as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't get the image out of her head. Tom's co-worker whispering something to him, his hasty exit from the meeting room. She felt like a detective piecing together clues, trying to solve a puzzle that didn't add up. The more she thought about it, the more her mind racing with questions. Why was Tom so evasive? What secrets was he hiding? The not knowing was killing her, leaving her with a gnawing sense of betrayal and mistrust. It was like a dam had burst open. Sarah's anger and hurt boiled over as she confronted her husband in the middle of their living room. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, her voice shaking with rage. Her eyes scanned the space, as if searching for some hidden clue or explanation that he'd been keeping from her all along. But there was nothing. Just the cold, hard reality of his lies. She stormed over to him, her fists clenched at her sides, and slapped a photo on the coffee table in front of him. It was one of them together, smiling and happy, taken just months before. "Is this what you've been doing all along? Behind my back?" she spat. The air was thick with tension as he looked up at her, his eyes avoiding hers, and mumbled something about it being over between them. Over. She felt like she'd been punched in the gut. The room seemed to spin around her as she struggled to breathe. How could this be happening? Why had he lied to her for so long? And what else was he hiding from her? The questions swirled in her head, but the answers remained just out of reach. As Sarah's world crumbled around her, the confrontation with her husband had left an unshakable scar. Their once harmonious home was now a battleground of broken trust and shattered dreams. The children, who had always been the center of their universe, were now caught in the crossfire. Emma, their 7-year-old daughter, couldn't understand why her mom and dad were arguing all the time. She would often ask Sarah, "Why can't we have dinner together like we used to?" The pain in Sarah's heart was palpable as she tried to explain that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but it didn't make it any easier for Emma to understand. Sarah's relationship with her husband had reached a critical point. They couldn't even share a meal without the tension between them being palpable. She felt like she was walking on eggshells, never knowing when he would lash out or shut down. The dynamic that once defined their marriage, love, trust, and mutual respect, had given way to suspicion, anger, and hurt. As Sarah struggled to come to terms with her husband's betrayal, she began to realize that their entire relationship was a facade. She wondered if she had been living in denial all along, ignoring the signs of his infidelity because it was easier than facing reality. As Sarah sat in the darkness of their empty apartment, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about John's behavior, and she was no longer willing to ignore it. The late-night phone calls, the business trips he'd take without her, the strange emails on his laptop, all these tiny threads of deception had finally unraveled her denial. With a newfound sense of resolve, Sarah started digging into John's activities. She pored over their bank statements, scrolled through his email archives, and even hacked into his phone records. A desperate move, she knew, but one that made her feel like a detective on the case. The more she uncovered, the more questions she had. Who was this Emily who kept popping up in his emails? Was it a colleague or something more? And what about those mysterious transfers to a different account? Were they some sort of business investment or something else entirely? Sarah's mind was racing with possibilities as she began to unravel the tangled web of secrets John had spun around her. As Sarah's eyes scanned the dusty attic, a faint glimmer caught her attention. A small, forgotten box tucked away on a shelf, hidden behind a stack of old trunks. Something about it seemed out of place, like a secret kept for far too long. Her heart racing, she opened the lid, and a wave of memories washed over her. Inside, she found a collection of faded photos, yellowed with age. A young couple smiling on their wedding day, holding hands with a beaming baby boy between them. The faces were unfamiliar, but something about the scene felt eerily familiar. Sarah's mind reeled as she turned the pages, her eyes widening in horror. John, her husband of 5 years, was standing alongside this family, a family he'd never mentioned, never even hinted at. A family that didn't exist in any story she knew. Her world began to crumble beneath her feet as the truth hit her like a sledgehammer. John wasn't who she thought he was. As Sarah delved deeper into the truth, she discovered that John's second family wasn't just some random encounter. They were a tight-knit unit, a loving family of 4 who had been together for over a decade. He'd met his partner, Emily, in college, and they'd built a life around their 2 young children. Sarah couldn't fathom how her husband could lead such a double life, compartmentalizing his relationships like that. She thought back to all the times John would take business trips or weekend getaways, always returning with an odd look in his eyes, never wanting to talk about it. Now she realized those trips were actually visits to his other family. The pain was suffocating her, but Sarah's mind kept racing. How did he manage to balance 2 families? What made him choose them over her? And what about the little things, like birthday cards and family photos? Were those just fabricated for her benefit, or did he truly care about Emily and their children too? As the truth sank in, Sarah felt like she was drowning in a sea of emotions. Anger raged through her veins, making her want to lash out at anyone who dared to cross her path. She couldn't bear the thought of him with another woman, building a life together, without even telling her. The pain and sadness were suffocating, making it hard for her to breathe. But beneath all that, there was something else. Shame. Shame for being so blind, for not seeing the signs, for thinking their marriage was perfect. Sarah's mind wandered back to all those times she'd confided in him about her own struggles with infertility. Had he been pretending to be empathetic, just to keep her from finding out? The thought made her skin crawl. She felt like she'd been living a lie, and now the whole world seemed like a twisted game of deceit. As she sat in stunned silence, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, what else had he lied about? Their friends, their family, even their own children? Her eyes began to well up with tears as she thought about Emily, the other woman. Who was she really? And why did her husband feel the need to keep her a secret? As Sarah tried to make sense of her husband's infidelity, she reached out to friends and family for support. But what started as a supportive ear turned into dismissive comments or outright disbelief. Her sister-in-law would say things like, "He's just stressed at work," or "You're being paranoid." Even Sarah's own mother downplayed the situation, suggesting that her husband was probably just getting attention from his female colleagues. Sarah felt isolated in her pain as she struggled to find people who believed her. It got to a point where she'd call her best friend and break down into tears. But even then, her friend would try to reassure her that it wasn't a big deal, or that he was probably just joking around. The more she shared, the more she felt like she was losing her mind. Sarah's husband had this charm, this charisma that seemed to shield him from any wrongdoing. People loved him, and it made it hard for them to see his infidelity as the betrayal that it was. As time went on, Sarah started to wonder if she was just being unreasonable or overly sensitive. But deep down, she knew what she had seen. Her husband sneaking out of the house in the dead of night, his phone blowing up with text messages from another number, and the way he'd quickly change the subject whenever she brought it up. It was one late night, as Sarah lay awake in bed, that the weight of her husband's infidelity finally became too much to bear. She thought about all the times she'd felt a nagging sense of doubt, but pushed it aside for the sake of their marriage. The memories flooded back, the constant excuses, the evasive answers, and now, those cryptic messages from another number. It was as if he was living two separate lives, and she was just a pawn in his game. Sarah felt a spark ignite within her, a flame that grew with each passing moment. She realized she deserved better than to be treated like this. With a newfound sense of strength, she began to envision a future without him, one where she'd find happiness on her own terms. The thought sent a shiver down her spine as she slowly got out of bed and made her way to the kitchen. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. As Sarah began to navigate the divorce process, she was met with a maze of paperwork, court dates, and emotional turmoil. The complexity of it all felt suffocating at times, but she knew she had to see it through for her children's sake. Their lives were already turned upside down by their parents' breakup. Now Sarah had to ensure they remained stable amidst the chaos. She pored over custody agreements, support payments, and visitation schedules, trying to make sense of the jargon-laden documents. One particularly grueling session with a lawyer left her feeling drained, but she knew it was all worth it when she saw the look on her kids' faces during their first supervised visit with their father. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder that this new reality, though painful, was also an opportunity for them to heal and move forward. Sarah's friends and family rallied around her, offering words of encouragement and helping hands whenever needed. But as the months dragged on, she began to realize that rebuilding her life wouldn't be easy. It would require patience, resilience, and a willingness to let go of the past. As Sarah began this new chapter in her life, she knew that rebuilding wasn't just about picking up the pieces. It was about creating something entirely new. She started by letting go of the weight of her marriage, piece by painful piece. It meant taking back control of her finances, which had been managed by her husband for years, and learning to budget on her own terms. Sarah vividly remembers the first time she paid herself a salary, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment. But it wasn't just about financial independence. It was also about reclaiming her identity. She started taking art classes, something she had always loved, but never made time for during her marriage. As she picked up a paintbrush, Sarah felt the tension in her body release, replaced by a sense of calm and purpose. With each passing day, she became stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. She learned to cherish her alone time, to listen to her own voice, and to trust her instincts. Sarah's journey was far from easy, but it was one that would ultimately set her free. Looking back, Sarah realized that she was so blinded by love and loyalty that she ignored the warning signs. She'd always prided herself on being a good listener, but in hindsight she remembers glossing over her partner's excuses and rationalizations. "I was so caught up in believing he loved me," Sarah says, her voice cracking with emotion. "But what I've learned is that love isn't just about how someone makes you feel. It's also about the choices they make." For Sarah, those choices were devastating. She thought she knew her partner, but it turned out she didn't know him at all. It was a painful truth to confront, but one that ultimately set her free from the toxic dynamic they'd created. "I've come to realize that honesty is not just about telling the truth," Sarah reflects, but also about being transparent and accountable. She's since made it a point to prioritize open communication in all her relationships, no matter how difficult the conversation may be. As Sarah navigated this new reality, she couldn't help but worry about the impact her divorce would have on their children, Emily and Jack. The usually energetic kids had become withdrawn, struggling to adjust to the sudden change in their family dynamic. They missed their father dearly, and it showed in their daily routines, from refusing to eat meals without him present to bursting into tears at random moments. Sarah's heart ached as she watched her children struggle to cope with their emotions. She made a conscious effort to remain calm, knowing that her kids needed her stability more than ever. The divorce had been messy, but Sarah was determined to prioritize open communication and co-parenting above all else. She made time for regular phone calls with her ex, coordinating schedules and sharing updates on the kids' progress. As she tucks Emily into bed one night, Sarah is met with a somber expression. "Mommy, I just want Daddy back." The weight of her children's pain settles heavy in her chest, but she knows she has to be strong for them. With a gentle hug and reassuring words, Sarah helps Emily process her emotions, promising that they'll get through this together. It's been 6 months since the truth came out, and Sarah's life is unrecognizable from the one she knew before. Gone are the lavish dinner parties and weekend getaways with her husband. Instead, she's found solace in the simple things. Quiet mornings spent sipping coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the trees. She's learned to cherish these moments, not just for herself, but for Emily too. As they navigate this new reality, Sarah's made it a point to prioritize their family time. They started a weekly game night tradition, where they'd cook dinner together and share stories. It was a way for them to connect and create memories without the burden of secrets. As I shared Sarah's story with you, I know some of you may have felt a deep sense of pain and validation at the same time. The weight of secrets can be crushing, but it's in those moments that we must hold on to hope. For Sarah, finding out about her partner's hidden secret was like losing a part of herself, but she chose not to give up. Instead, she began to rebuild and rediscover who she was outside of the relationship. She started taking classes, reconnecting with old friends, and even volunteering at a local charity. It wasn't easy, but slowly, Sarah found her footing again. And here's the thing, it's okay to not be okay right now. It's okay to feel lost and alone in the midst of all this pain. But I want you to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Think about it. When we're walking through a storm, we can't see what's ahead, but we can trust that the sun will shine again. And for Sarah, that sunshine came in the form of new relationships, new experiences, and a renewed sense of purpose. She found her voice, she found her strength, and she found herself again. As Sarah embarked on this new chapter, she quickly realized that the road to healing was far from over. Co-parenting with her ex, who still harbored deep resentment towards her, proved to be a daunting task. There were days when he wouldn't show up for scheduled visits, leaving Sarah to pick up the pieces and reassure their children that everything would be okay. She had to constantly remind herself not to take it personally, but it was hard not to feel hurt when your own flesh and blood couldn't even muster the effort to show up. Despite these challenges, Sarah remained vigilant in her commitment to her children's well-being and her own healing journey. She continued to prioritize self-care, attending therapy sessions, and joining a support group for women who had gone through similar experiences. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild trust with herself, learning to navigate the gray areas of life without getting caught up in the darkness. It wasn't easy, but Sarah refused to let her ex's behavior define her. She chose instead to focus on the love and resilience that had carried her this far. As Sarah walked out of the darkness and into the light, she couldn't help but notice the beauty that had been there all along. The vibrant colors of nature, the warmth of a sunny day, the sound of children's laughter. It was as if her senses had been rebooted. She felt alive again. For so long, Sarah had defined herself by her relationship, by the love she thought she'd lost. But now, she saw that life was still precious, even in its imperfections. She started taking long walks alone, feeling the dew on her face and the breeze in her hair. She rekindled old hobbies, like painting and reading, and discovered new passions for cooking and gardening. The love she thought had been lost became a catalyst for growth, not just of herself, but also of those around her. Her children saw their mother's strength and resilience, and they, too, began to flourish. As Sarah looked in the mirror, she didn't see the same broken woman who'd walked out of that marriage. She saw a warrior, scarred but unbroken. And with each passing day, she felt herself becoming stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. As Sarah continued on her journey of healing and growth, she began to realize that the key to unlocking true happiness was not found in someone else's arms, but within herself. She started small, taking long baths, practicing yoga, and reading self-help books. But it wasn't until she made a conscious decision to prioritize her own needs that she truly started to thrive. As Sarah walked out of the therapist's office for the last time, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The journey had been long and arduous, but she'd finally emerged stronger and wiser. For years she'd been living in survival mode, sacrificing her own happiness to keep the peace in her troubled relationship. But now, as she gazed out at the sun-kissed streets of Los Angeles, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism wash over her. She thought about all the things she wanted to do: travel, learn a new language, start painting again, and a smile crept across her face. It was as if the entire world had been put on pause while she navigated the darkness, and now that she'd made it through to the other side, life was finally opening up its doors to her. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the warm breeze fill her lungs, and whispered to herself, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." As the curtains closed on this chapter of her life, a new one unfolded, full of hope and endless possibilities. As we close the book on Sarah's story, I want you to remember that she's not just a victim of her partner's betrayal. She's a warrior who fought for her freedom, her happiness, and her right to love again. The scars may still be visible, but they're no longer debilitating. In fact, they've become a reminder of the strength she discovered within herself. Just like the lotus flower that blooms in the muddiest of waters, Sarah rose above the chaos and found beauty in the darkness. And as we reflect on her journey, it's clear that this experience has been a crucible for transformation, a chance to shed old skin and emerge anew. Sarah's story serves as a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience and forgiveness. She didn't let her pain define her. Instead, she used it as fuel to ignite a brighter future. As she looks out at this new chapter of her life, I know she sees endless possibilities, opportunities to explore, grow, and love without apology or hesitation. As we conclude Sarah's story, it's clear that her journey has been one of transformation and growth. From the depths of heartache and betrayal, she's emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. Her experiences are a powerful reminder that we all have the capacity to heal, to forgive, and to start anew. So as you reflect on Sarah's story, remember that you too can create a brighter future for yourself. There is always hope, no matter what challenges you may be facing. And if you're looking for more stories like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel for new episodes every week.